Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the GC Show. I hope y'all are doing absolutely amazing. We have another guest episode this week. We have Mrs. Beasley on the show. How are you doing today, Mrs. Beasley?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Love to hear it. So jumping right into the questions, I've been asking the guests this recently, and I want to ask you as well. Would you be able to share just a little bit about your testimony?
Well, I've heard people say that they have a boring testimony. That's a common thing. Some people say that there isn't a boring testimony. Mine's maybe not boring, but somewhat typical, I guess. I did grow up in a Christian home. I don't take that for granted. That was a blessing. So went to church from the time I was born all the way through school, and then went off to college. And that was really the time that I grew the most as a Christian, kind of getting away from the comforts of home and family and that kind of thing where you can make your own decisions. Thankfully, I had a really good group of friends in college and continued that. Graduated from college and then went on to seminary for a few years. But then eventually I met my husband, got married, had some kids. And so that's kind of like the I guess, summary of everything. But I was fortunate to come to know the Lord at an early age. But I've definitely had experiences that have grown my faith. And always the ones that are the most trying are the ones that have grown my faith the most, I would say.
That's really cool. And with going off to seminary, you know, how was that experience with doing all that?
Honestly, it was pretty neat. I didn't actually finish the program. I was going for a master's in psychology. My undergraduate was in psychology, and I was going to go into counseling. And I was there. I loved it. It was great. But I was in Texas, really far away from home, kind of homesick. And I learned a lot, though. I learned, it's kind of funny. You would have never thought this, but I just learned how judgmental I was, which is I had been around Christians my whole life. And then when I was in college, you know, I had a lot of Christian friends. I mean, I was at a regular, secular university, but when I got to seminary, I met so many different people, and I just realized that just the judgmental part. I was just never really realized that about myself, which obviously I was there for an education. I got one, but it grew my faith in a big way. Being surrounded by obviously other Christians, but people from so many different parts of the world and different perspectives and things like that. So overall, it was a good experience. Obviously, I didn't go into counseling or psychology, but I don't feel like any education's a waste, so I still use it. It's just not my primary job at the moment.
Yeah, and that's really cool. And that kind of, in a way, translates over into teaching, which is what you currently do. And I want to ask you, how long have you been a teacher?
So I went back part-time in 2013. Before that, right when I first got married, we got married in 2001, just celebrated 25 years in March.
Congratulations.
So that's a really big deal. But I worked, I was a substitute teacher, and I worked in an admissions office back when I first got married. Then when I started having kids, stayed home with the kids. And then around 2013 was when I went back full-time. I was at a private school for a year. And then when Patriot Oaks opened in 2014, I went there. And I always wanted to homeschool my kids. That was just something I'd always wanted to do. But it just wasn't something that we were really able to do at the time. My husband's a police officer, and so I really needed to, I'd stayed home for a long time, so I really needed to find a job. So I'm like, well, if I can't homeschool them, then I'll just get a job as a teacher and follow them. And that's what I did.
That's really cool. And that was actually what I was going to, ask you kind of something next is, with being a teacher, was that something that you always wanted to do, that growing up, once you had kids, you said, like, this is what I fully want to do, with career-wise and everything?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I never had any big ambitions for a career. Not that I didn't want to work or was lazy. It's just I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family, and I wanted to be a mom. That's what my mom did, and she was amazing at it. She still is. And so that's what I wanted. And so when I had a family, that was my focus. And then whatever career or job that could go around that was what I wanted to do. So teaching, I did actually have my minor in school was education. So my major was psychology, my minor was education. So I started off wanting to do teaching, and then I kind of switched to psychology. So having that minor was helpful in the long run. But really, I didn't have any huge goals with teaching. I just wanted to be with my kids. So the more I kind of got into it, I I had to take some more college classes to kind of go for the teaching certification. I had to take these tests that were terrible that I had failed a bunch. And that's what I did. So I just kept doing different things, and eventually wanted to go to high school. So in 2019 is when I went to Creekside, and still there.
That's really cool. And now with, being a teacher, how has your faith been able to play a role in that?
It's huge, because I think it's so important that we have educators that are Christians, and not just necessarily in a Christian school, but so that we can be a light in especially a public school.
For sure.
I went to First Baptist from basically right out of college, and then on through around like 2004-ish. And Dr. Lindsay used to always say how important it was that we had Christian educators in public schools. And that was something I always remembered. It was something simple, but you always think that, it's so much better to be at a public, to be at a private Christian school and be around that environment, which is true. It's wonderful, but not everybody can afford that.
Yeah.
And usually the ones that need it the most for the kids in our public school, because they're not having any exposure to it at all. And so I felt like that was important to have that background and to have that basis. Even though I can't necessarily share Christ at school, I can share it by the way I treat students.
Yeah, and that's really cool because, sometimes you may think that, being a Christian teacher in a school, that doesn't really have that much of an effect, or it's a super big deal. When in reality, it's a huge deal, even just through your actions and just showing love to students as you go throughout the day. It's something that's just super, super cool. Mm-hmm. So along with that, why do you think being rooted in faith as a teacher is something that is really, really important, more on than just, the actions? What can students take from that, from your actions, the things you say, the things you do?
Well, one thing that I do every morning, and some mornings I forget, but I try to when we have our moment of silence, I started this several years ago, is when they have the moment of silence, is I just say, Lord, help me see them the way you do. Now, do I do that every day? No. Do I do it all day? No. I teach 9th grade, and that can be really tough because they don't really have brains, and it's just, especially the boys, they always give me a ton of classes with boys. Every year, I always have at least 75% of all my 9th grade classes are boys.
Really?
Yes, it happens every year. I've had classes where I'll have 2 girls.
That's insane.
It's crazy. It happens all the time. I guess I don't know if they think I can handle it. I don't know if it's an accident. I don't know. But I do. I always get
funny.
The boys. And so it's been challenging as far as just how they act. And it's just really having that mindset at the beginning of the day to say, okay, you've put me in this position. Obviously, yes, I'm here to be with my own kids, but yeah, it's my job. It's a calling. I feel like it's a calling more than a job. But the way that I treat those students is so important, because I can be Jesus to them without ever saying his name. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I try to instill in other students that I can have conversations with the Lord about. I say, you can witness to your friends in the way you treat them. And I feel like is the way it starts. If we want to really share the love of Christ with people, I feel like we need to be able to, they need to see that before we ever even mention a Bible verse or any of that. They need to see it in how we treat them. And I think that's important in how I treat the students, is showing, treating them the way Christ would treat them.
And that's just such a cool mindset to have, because, people notice action so much more than what you think they do. So, being able to be a light in that sense is something mm-hmm. that's just so, so cool. And I want to ask you, what are some of the lessons that you've learned through growing as a teacher as well as growing in your faith?
Well, my big thing and that's one reason I love teaching high school, is building relationships with students. Is if you don't build relationships with a student, especially in high school, then I feel like you're going to be very ineffective as a teacher. I actually spoke to a teacher in January. He's an intern, and he interned for a couple of weeks at our school. And I was talking to him about, he had done a lesson, and we were talking about different things, and he asked me things that I felt like were important. And I said, the first thing you need to do is you establish the boundaries in the classroom, like, okay, these are the rules. But the very next thing you do is you establish relationship with the students. And you let them know that you care about them first, and then their academics. My big thing is when they walk through my door in my classroom, if they know they're loved and accepted, that's honestly all that matters. If they learn a little bit of government, world history, that's great. I know that's what I'm paid to do, but I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel that they can be who they are. They're not being judged, and that everything. It's just this kind of a safe place for them to be. It's just, that's so important. Now, it doesn't like it's always magic and everything's wonderful and it's perfect. That's not the case, but relationships are huge, because I feel like that's important. And I think it's important too that kids know that they don't have to like me. They might think I'm weird. They might, whatever, that's fine. But I still want them to feel like they're accepted, and it's a place where they can just kind of relax and be themselves.
And that's so cool, because I mean, just students sometimes are going throughout the day just to like get to the next class, and they like don't really care necessarily about the people who are in the class. So being able to build relationships with those kids, and I know it's just hearing from other students and stuff, like people who have had you in the past, like they really enjoy being in your class. And I just think that's so cool that they know coming to your class every day that it's a place where they can belong, a place where they feel seen, a place where they feel loved. So it's really cool that you make that environment for your students.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought would be interesting to ask you, because you're a teacher, is school students are always striving to achieve good grades, and sometimes it's very easy as a student to let that be something that defines who you are. How would you define success in your words, whether it's in school or out of school?
Well, for in school, and it's hard sometimes with this, because I know that, like with my own children, my big thing was always, did you do your best? We had 3 rules: be respectful of everyone, do your best, and have fun. Those were our 3 rules for school. If you respect everyone first, then you do your best, whatever that looks like. If it's an A, great. If it's a C, okay, fine. If it's a D, that's not great, but whatever. If you failed, okay, what went wrong? Let's fix that. But do your best. And so, and then of course, have fun. That's always important. But I think with the students, the message I try to send to them is excellence. Like, did you do the best you could on this assignment, or did you just kind of just blow it off and you didn't really try? But if you did your best and you really tried, then that's okay. And I think it's important that, I feel like we test kids so much that it's just ridiculous. And it's almost like, if you're not a good test taker, you're never going to succeed in life. You're not going to make good grades. You're not going to get to go to a good college, all these things. But then we forget that there's other things that kids are good at. And just because they don't test well doesn't mean they're not smart. I've taught AP, I've taught honors, I've taught standard. And the only difference is, it's not so much that the AP kids are so much smarter, it's just that a lot more is expected out of them. People assume that they care, and so they teach different. If it's a standard class, a lot of times teachers just assume the kids don't care. And that's not true, they do care. They've just been told that they're not smart their whole life. And for somebody that's had to work really hard for every grade I got, through school and college and all that, I understand that. So it's important to me to recognize when a student's truly trying the best they can, and pick out, okay, you did this great, but this we need to work on. So they don't feel like their whole worth is in a grade.
Yeah, and that's even one of the things with the school system, where everything's all about like getting good grades in your tests and everything. And it's like there's so many different routes to success in life than just being good at school, getting good grades, being a good test taker. And being able to recognize that, like on your end, is something that's really cool, to encourage students, saying like, even if you're not a good test taker, like there's still other skills that you have that are very, very useful, whether in school or outside of school. And
I always tell students, because they always get very interested in, like around January, when you're going to recommend them for the next school year, they always want to, I want to take this class, or I want to take, and they always want to take an AP class because it sounds cool. Okay, well, it might sound cool, and I always tell them, they're like, I have an A, it's fine. I've had kids that have had an A in my class, but I didn't recommend them, and the reason I didn't, because their work ethic was terrible. And I'll tell them, if you don't have a good work ethic, I'm not going to recommend you for the next class up. Because to me, I feel like it's not just your grade, it's, do you turn assignments in on time? Do you truly give your best? Because I feel like excellence should be rewarded. And I've had students that have had B's that I've recommended for a higher level course, because I know the work ethic is there and I know they can do it.
Yeah, and that's really cool, because it's more not necessarily like the grade you get, but it's how hard you work, and like what you're willing to put towards something that determines like opportunities in the future, what you're going to do with this opportunity.
That's a lot. I feel like that kind of mimics, like you say, like more life lessons. Is like, sometimes you might not get you might get an A because you got lucky, but sometimes you might get an A because you worked really hard. But sometimes you work hard and get a B, and that's okay. So.
And there's a lot through that, doesn't seem like it's necessarily a big deal with like different things in school, but there's so many lessons that you can learn through school and like doing assignments, taking tests, and everything of the sort, that you learn so much about yourself. And, as a teacher, I bet you learn so much about students and, different patterns in students. So I think that's something that's really, really cool. So, and I want to ask you, you mentioned how before you're at POA and now you're over at Creekside, there's many different levels of school that teachers can teach at. What made you like want to choose high school specifically?
Well, it's funny, kind of the same theme of I just followed my kids. I was in elementary when I first started teaching. I was in elementary. I was a PE teacher for 2 years. So I had 4-year-olds all the way up to 8th grade the first year, and then the second year was, or second, I guess 2 years after that, it was basically elementary. And it was fine. I learned a lot. Would I ever go back to elementary? Absolutely not. There's no way. You've got to be able to tie your own shoe and wipe your own nose and all that good stuff. But I'm glad I had that experience because it helped me, especially I've been in the same county the whole time. I know kind of how things are done, and you learn the progression that students follow through school. And then I did teach middle school a little bit here and there when I was at Patriot Oak, so that gave me a perspective on middle school. So then when I got to Creekside, it was kind of cool. When I got there, fall of 2019, I was teaching a 9th grade class, and I had literally had some of the students that were in my class, I had just had them in 8th grade at POA.
Really?
So it was cool because I'm like, okay, I know you learned that because I taught it to you last year, so don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. So that was cool because I had already built relationships with them, and then now they're in high school. So that's kind of what led me, is just that, like I said, following kids. But it's been great because I'm glad I had the opportunities I had before. It helped me be more prepared. But I wouldn't want to go any lower in age as far as being below high school.
And that's really cool. And how you're saying earlier, how able to build relationships with kids. It's a lot easier at the high school age to build relationships with kids. 'Cause, middle school and elementary school kids are more squirrely and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Now, I want to ask you, what are some of the stories that, when it comes to teaching, you will never forget?
Well, it's funny. There's one that sticks out, and it kind of goes along the relationship route. But I had this one kid several years ago, and we were going around. I was asking questions, and it's always a challenge as a teacher to get the kids involved and to engage. And I always tell the kids, I'm like, I'm up here teaching, but you don't want to listen to me the whole time. That's why I want you guys to, I don't want this just to be me talking. I want you to raise your hand and talk. Let's make this a discussion. So I try really hard to make it where they feel comfortable answering questions. I always let them know that, like, if you answer it wrong, I'll do my best to I won't say, oh, you're so stupid, I can't believe you said that. I want them to feel comfortable, even if they don't know what the answer is. But when I ask you a question, at least be respectful, whatever. Anyway, so I was going through the lesson. I don't even know what we were teaching. And I asked a student a question. I don't know if I asked him to read or something, but anyway, the way he responded was just so disrespectful. I wanted to just jerk a knot in his tail. It made me so mad. I was just like, how dare you talk to me that way? But something, and it was like the Holy Spirit said, just keep your mouth shut and just ignore it and keep going. And that's exactly what I did. Now, normally there were times where I'm like, what is wrong with you? Why are you being so like that's what I would, and that would have been kind of a normal response, I feel like. But just, it was like the Lord was saying, just ignore it and move on. So that's what I did. So we had our lesson, whatever, and they were all working on some stuff. So I said, hey, come outside. I want to chat with you for a minute. And of course, he thought he was in trouble. And I said, what's going on? I was like, you were really rude to me, and that's not how you usually are. And he was kind of one of those kids that, like, you knew when he walked in the room, he just had an attitude. But you're like, I had to step back and say, what's he going home to at night that caused him to act that way? Because it's not like someone sat him down and said, just there was a reason for it. So I said, what's going on? How can I help? And anyway, so he started telling me about his family and how his mom was working 2 jobs. His grandmother lived with him, and he was basically taking care of his younger siblings. And he was about to cry when he was telling me all this. And I was just like, thank the Lord that I didn't just, lash out at him in class. Now, does he have an attitude sometimes? Yes, but it was like from that moment on, we built a relationship that entire year. He started getting really good grades, and it was like it turned everything around. It wasn't mean it was perfect, but it was like instead of me just assuming that he's just being a jerk, he's got a lot to deal with that a ninth grade boy shouldn't have to deal with. And I don't know, just that story always stuck out. I don't know that I handled it perfectly, but it was in that moment, I just was able to not react, but to just respond and hopefully make a difference. Now, I won't say I've always done that. I have yelled. You can ask my son. There have been moments where I, lost my cool, but I feel like that one was a win that I was able to kind of keep it down.
And that's so cool in that situation because, there's so many different things that people are going through that you really just have no idea about. And, I bet you taking them outside and like having that conversation with them, I bet that changed probably so much for him and changed his mindset of how he just sees everything. So you being able to be there for him, I think, is something that's really cool because there's a lot of teachers in school that wouldn't think that way, that wouldn't think to, a kid's being mean in class, what is going on outside of school. Whereas like maybe they would just lash out and, just like get mad at the kid because he responded disrespectfully. So it's really cool that you saw that as an opportunity to like, get to know him a little bit and build a relationship with him.
And that's the Lord. That's not me. Like that's not a normal human response. Like it's like if and that's where I think it's so important for me personally to have a strong relationship with the Lord because, obviously like I said earlier, I grew up in church and all that, but I feel like that's the worst in a sense where, and I know Pastor Joby talks about this a lot, where sometimes like people that have been Christians their whole life, we just get this kind of like flow of things where we just kind of become apathetic to stuff. And I think we have to be careful of that because we need to make sure that, like for me as a teacher, I need to make sure that I'm consistent reading the Word, that I'm consistently having that time so that when I get to school, my mind is set in a place where I can be because it's a calling. And I think that's why it's so important to have Christian educators, but Christian educators that are growing in the Lord, because if I'm not growing in the Lord and I'm not living this out, I'm not going to be very effective.
Yeah, and that's just so cool that, getting rooted in the Word every single day because, again, going back to the fact that your actions, the things you say, like may not seem like a big deal in your mind, but there's so many people that focus on so many of the little things. So just being rooted in Christ is something that's really important and really cool that you do think that way when it comes to teaching and thinking about, teaching as a calling rather than just, a job you show up to 5 days of the week. I think that's something that's really cool. And I want to ask you, if you could choose to have a different job besides teaching, would you?
Well, it's funny. Everyone thought that as soon as David graduated that I would, leave or whatever. And then it's funny now, everyone's asking me, are you going to retire? And I'm like, no, I'll be working until I'm 100. But because, I don't really have this, I took a lot of time off when I was raising my kids. So, there's a huge, I don't have this impressive resume of all this work experience. But one thing I love, and it's kind of silly, but I don't know, I just think it's a cool idea, is I got a golden retriever 2 years ago. And I'm the only one in the family that wanted her. Everybody else was like, this is dumb. We don't need it, because I have a dog. She's kind of a dog. She's actually right here, to be honest. But we have this golden retriever. I wanted her forever, but I wanted her to be a therapy dog. And so, but what's the coolest thing is she's not a therapy dog yet, but we're working on it. But what's cool is the whole family has fallen in love with this dog. And she's the sweetest thing in the whole world. But what I would love to do, if I could somehow get paid for it, is to take her to hospitals or elderly homes, memory care facilities, all those things. And I actually did it about 15 years ago. My parents had a dog, and I did that with him. And it was the coolest thing. It was called Canines for Christ.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Cool.
And we would take dogs into different retirement homes, and they would just light up seeing these pets that were, they were well trained. They just walked around. People would pet a dog, and it was just so relaxing. And it was just a neat way to minister to people with an animal. So I would love to get paid to do that. Of course, I love photography. Sometimes I get paid for it, sometimes I don't. But I don't know. It's one of those things. I have thought about different things, but it's something I've prayed about for a couple years as to, what I keep doing what I'm doing. Is there something else? And the short answer is I don't know.
That's a really cool idea, though, because even just seeing an animal that has all the energy in the world and is excited, like that brings joy to so many people.
It does.
And that'd be a really cool thing.
Yeah. I had to, about a month ago, I had to go to Mayo and get some, to the doctor, and had some injuries and things that was just, and I was all kind of feeling sorry for myself. And we walked out, we got downstairs, and Mayo is like the Taj Mahal of hospitals. It's absolutely gorgeous. And there was a golden retriever. I mean, it was the sweetest thing. And so I went up, of course, naturally, and talked to the lady for 30 minutes, asked her a million questions. She was so sweet. But the sweetest thing was the dog. We would walk up, and she said the dog would put his head, like, he was standing, but he would just put his head by your leg. And she said, that's him giving you a hug. And I don't know, I thought that was so sweet, because then she was telling me all about all the patients that she sees. And I was like, what a ministry to have an animal to go around and just minister to people that are just there working, or if it's patients or whatever, just to kind of have that dog to kind of just sit there and be like, they don't care what you look like, if you're smart, if you're not, none of that matters. They just want you to pet them. That's it.
Yeah, that's just something that's so cool, and something that, I mean, you, like, the average person would just think about, like, doing something like that. So that's something that's really, really cool. So outside of school, you're a wife and a mom. What are some of the things that you enjoy the most about both of those things?
Well, wife, so I was a wife first. We've been married 25 years in March of this year, which is a miracle. Just because, and not because, like, he's awful or I'm awful. It's just that staying married today is just kind of not the thing. If you have a crisis, you just get divorced and you're done. And we have to work at it. That's just how it is. It's just life. It's not perfect. We argue, we get on each other's nerves, we fight, all those things, but we're here and we're going to make this work. And we're a good team. We are a good team. One thing that was a blessing when our kids were little is we were pretty much always on the same page as how we raised our kids. Everyone thought we were crazy because they called us helicopter parents and we were too strict and all this, but I would always tell people, I have to answer to God on how I raise my children, and you raise your kids how you want. I'm going to raise them how I want, and I'm sure I've made a lot of mistakes, but I did the best I could. And it was just important to me that we raise our kids to learn to love and serve the Lord. And as far as being a mom, I mean, that's just the best thing in the whole world. We've always been a close family, and again, it's not like we're just walking around singing hymns and just quoting Bible verses and everybody loves each other and they don't fight. That's not the case. They fight, they get on each other's nerves, and but at the end of the day, we're still a family, we're still close. It's not perfect. I think now is a bigger challenge than when they were growing up, because I've got 3 adult children that are all trying to be their own person, and they're all in the same house. And that can be a challenge, because they're trying to be who they want to be, and it's all different, which is great. That's how I want it to be. I want them to be their own person. So being a mom is just the biggest blessing in the whole world. I don't take it for granted one second. And as far as being a teacher, I feel like that's helped me tremendously, because I have a perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise. But being the mom is the best job I could ever have.
That's really cool. And I know outside of school, you also have some hobbies. You mentioned earlier photography and running. What got you into those 2 hobbies? And are there other hobbies besides that you're really into?
So running, I always loved. I've never really been good at it, but I'm not very fast. I don't do anything fast. But I've always loved running. I ran in high school. I ran like college, not in like on the for the university, but I did like races and stuff like that. But that was just something I always enjoyed doing, and it was always something that mentally just kind of kept me balanced. It wasn't so much just losing weight or exercising. It's just good balance, just taking care of your body. I like to go out for a run. I'd rather go for a run than lift weights. I know that's weird, but and I did get into triathlons in 2014. That was a huge challenge. Lots of trial and error with that. So that was kind of my next thing after the running.
And I mean, running's something that's super healthy for the body too. So I mean, that's really cool getting into that. And even because you can do that so easily for fun. Oh yeah. You just go out, even if it's like going for a walk or going for a run. Yeah. Like there's not a lot that you have to that goes into that necessarily in regards to like equipment and stuff like that. So that's really cool. What are some of the big accomplishments within running that you have accomplished?
Well, I ran my first. What's funny, my first half marathon was 2002. Sarah May was born in May of that year, and then I ran the half that fall. And I can remember crossing the finish line and thinking, there's no way I would do this again. Like, literally turn around and run 13.1 miles again. So I was like, how do people run marathons? Like, that just seemed so far out of reach. So then years went by, and I started, and as being a stay-at-home mom, you have to, even though it was a job I wanted, it's still tough. It's, exhausting mentally, physically, all that. So running really helped me with that, stay balanced. So eventually I started training for a marathon. So 2010 was my first marathon. I did that for a couple years. And then I had a friend that had done some triathlons, which is swimming, biking, and then running. Swimming, I know how to swim, but I didn't really, there was no technique. I just get in the pool, whatever. I couldn't swim from wall to wall without stopping. I'd be out of breath and feel like I was going to die. And then biking, I was always scared to be on a bike because I was hit by a car when I was 12 on a bike, so I just kind of ruined that. I'd ride a little bit here and there, but with a road bike or a triathlon bike, your feet are clipped in the pedals, all that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, your feet are attached to the pedals.
I didn't know that.
And you have the aero bars, and I can remember the first time I got on a bike with the clip-in pedals. I thought I was gonna have a nervous breakdown. Plus, the tires are skinny. It's just there's a lot that goes into it. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to do it. So I fell a lot, had a lot of bruises and things like that. So I did a sprint triathlon in 2014. And then I thought, well, I'll try this half Ironman thing. It seems doable. And so it was a 1.2 mile swim, a 56 mile bike ride, and then a 13-mile run. That's a half Iron. So I did that in fall of 2014. And then I thought, well, if I can do the half, surely I could do the whole thing. I mean, why not? So the next year, 2015, I was training. I had an injury, but I had to have surgery. So I thought, well, that might kind of put me back. But I healed up pretty quickly. So fall of that year, I did Ironman Florida. I was ready to go. I trained. I did all the things you have to do. It's a 2.4 mile swim in the ocean.
Holy smokes.
Got that done. Got on the bike. Got to mile 80, and I thought that they were there to kind of cheer us on, whatever. And they're like, "We want to let you know you missed an intermediate cutoff." I'm like, "What does that mean?" They're like, "Well, you missed it by 11 minutes." So my day was done. So I was registered as a DNF, which means did not finish. I was devastated. It was awful. And so, but it was kind of neat because I met some really cool people that I'm still friends with now, and I would have never met if I hadn't have, But that was just I was so mad at myself because I was so upset. I'm like, this is just a race. Why am I so depressed about, had all these things, whatever. So well, I'll do it again. So 2016 comes around, but I had a bike crash, and so that set me back a couple months, but I was like, well, I'm still going to train. So I go fall of 2016 in Maryland, got there, and it was race day, and they had to cancel the swim because the weather was so bad. And I looked at your questions, and I know one of them was, I think it was a quote. I think that was one of your questions. But this is where I got my quote. That morning, the guy said, your attitude and your effort are the only things you can control. And I thought, wow. He said, I know you're all disappointed because we canceled the swim, and now you can only do the bike and the run, and you don't feel like it's the real thing. He's like, but you need to be grateful that you're even able to train for something like this. Because there's people all over the world that would give anything to be where you're at right now before you even start the race. And I thought, whoa, that was a lot. So I did that race. It was in the rain. There was the marathon, the water was up to your knee. It was crazy, but I finished. But I was like, I didn't really do the whole thing because the swim was canceled. So I was like, all right, we're going to do this one more time. So 2017 rolls around. I trained, and fall of November 2017, I went back to Florida where I DNF'd the last time. And they did this whole story on me and all this. And the big thing that I messaged was I didn't want my kids to see me give up. And I told them when stuff gets hard, you don't give up, period. You just keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And at the same time all this was going on, I was trying to pass my general knowledge test to be a teacher, and I kept failing them. The math and the reading kept failing. And I just kept taking them over and over. I was like, if I have to take them 100 times, I will do that. But that helped me be a better teacher because it just did. But anyway, so November 2017, I crossed the finish line. I swam 2.4 miles in the ocean. I biked 112, and I ran a marathon.
That's insane.
It took me 15 hours and 29 minutes.
Holy smokes. And there's not many people that can say that they have done something like that.
Well, and it's funny because today, actually right now, is Jacksonville, Ironman Jacksonville. It's the first time. And I was supposed to be there. And I had registered because I did one in my 40s. I really wanted to do one in my 50s. But back in March, I came across some injuries that I needed to get, to fix and kind of heal from. And so I just made the decision to defer to next year, which I didn't really want to do. And again, I was kind of that, you feel sorry for yourself, but it was like, the Lord was like, just calm down, you'll get stronger. You can train again next year. So it's just kind of cool that we're doing this today, and that the race is today and all that. And that's why I have the tattoo. It's not so much that, I'm obsessed with Ironman, but I look down at that, and that's my reminder, because you don't get the tattoo unless you finish the race, by the way.
Oh.
But I look at that, and that's the reminder of you don't give up, no matter what it is.
That's pretty cool.
That's why I have that tattoo. And I have my watch, so I can cover it up if I need to.
That's so cool.
So that's why I have
That's
it.
amazing, yeah.
Anyway, I know it was a really long answer, but
No, I love that. So
it's shaped so much of kind of who I am over the last 10, 15 years. Just that experience has helped me with a lot of other things. So
I mean, that's a huge accomplishment and something that's most definitely worthy of sharing. So I'm glad you went in depth with that.
Well,
really
and I always
cool.
tell people, if I can do it, anyone can. Because I literally couldn't swim hardly at all or bike. I was terrible. And I'm still slow, but I can do it. So.
Oh, that's funny. So now, season 2 of the GC show is all about answering the call, doing the thing that God is calling you to do in this world. So what does that statement, being called, mean to you personally?
When I think of being called, I feel like I've always been called, but the thing that comes to mind initially is being consistent with the call. Because like I mentioned, that I was raised in a Christian home and all those things, which is, all great. But I feel like with that, I lose consistency, or I lose that excitement that somebody has when they first come to Christ. And I think it's so important that I'm consistent with that, and know that when I pick up the Word, that I can read something that I've probably read 1,000 times, but see something new that I had never seen before. And I think that goes into my attitude, is the attitude I bring when I pick up the Word, and being consistent with that. Because if I'm called, which I am, then I got to be consistent with the rest of it.
That's really cool, yeah. And are there ever times when it comes to that you feel unworthy or unqualified of, your calling in this world?
Every day. Honestly, I really do. And not in a sense of, I have a really low self-esteem, but there are just times where, like, different jobs I've gotten, I'm like, how did that happen? Or different interviews I've been on where I've answered questions, I'm like, where did that come from? And I feel like when we recognize that we're called first, and that everything that we have and everything that we're given is from the Lord, whether, academics comes easily or whether it doesn't, anything that we do that we're good at, or even things that we're not good at, everything comes from the Lord. And I think when we look at it that way, whether it's tangible or intangible, it changes our whole perspective, and then it also changes how we live out what we do every single day. And it just helps me to know that I depend on the Lord for everything, and then let Him just take care of the details.
That's amazing. And for someone who may be in that mindset where they may feel unworthy or unqualified, what would you want to tell that person?
I would say that the Lord wants you to come to Him just as He is. Like right now, you don't do anything. Just walk right in. Where I attend church right now is, to me, is somewhere I feel like I could literally invite anyone and they would feel comfortable. And that's a gift to be able to have that. Because that's not always the case.
Yeah.
A lot of times church can be the most judgmental place on earth, unfortunately. And for somebody that feels unworthy and feels like they're too far gone, that's never the case. And I think that it's important that we recognize that, we don't get so high and mighty on ourselves that we think, I'm so much better than you because I grew up in church. That's just not the case.
Yeah, that's just something that's so cool too, is like with being at the church of 1122, is it's so like open to everyone. It's like anyone can show up. It's a movement for all people to discover and deepen the relationship with Jesus. I think that's something that's really, really
And the thing I
cool.
always tell people is, I've never felt more comfortable inviting anyone, like, because the way I grew up, like, we dressed up a lot more for church, which isn't a bad thing, but like, you could show up however you want, it doesn't matter. But with that said, that doesn't mean that when the word is preached that it's watered down and it's this, just fluffy stuff. That's not the case. Yes, come in as you are, but you're going to get the truth, and it's going to be given to you in love. And that's what I love, because it's such a good combination of be who you are, and then we're going to tell you the truth that you need to hear.
Yeah, and that truth is difficult. It's uncomfortable a lot of times, but it's like you need to have those uncomfortable seasons and hear the uncomfortable, hard thing to be able to grow in your faith. So that's something that, it's, again, like with the Church of 1122, it's really cool how they do it in that sense, for sure. So now I want to ask you, what Bible verse or passage would you say has impacted your life the most?
Well, actually, I've thought about this, and I know sometimes we'll say like a life verse, and I think of this more as a season verse. And this is kind of, and I say season, it's kind of a long season, but like I was mentioning my Ironman story, and then with that was my kind of the journey to get my teaching certificate. I had been out of college for a while, and a long time, and I had to take all these tests, and I kept failing them, and it was so it was just it was embarrassing, because I was like, I have a college degree, I'm an adult, and I'm going to lose my job because I can't pass this test. I mean, it was awful. I felt so stupid. I mean, genuinely, I did, and it was so hard. And I mean, I had times where I was just feeling sorry for myself, and I just finally had to say, you know what, I can do this. I am not going to give up. And I found this verse about being humble, and it's in 1 Peter 5. I'll read part of verse 5, and then verse 6 and 7. Sorry, that's what it is. Is the kind of the main part of it. But in verse 5, it's humility. It says, "Clothe yourselves, all of you, humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves," and this is the part that I love, love, love. "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. At the proper time, He may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on Him, because He cares for you." And what that verse says to me is that, first of all, to be humble and to know that everything I have is from the Lord, but at the right time, it's going to happen. Whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you at the time, at the right time, you're going to pass your test. At the right time, you're going to cross the finish line. At the right time, you're going to get the job or get the degree or whatever. It's going to happen, but just be patient, be humble, and just don't give up. And that verse for me just, I don't know, I always write that in kids' yearbooks if it's, appropriate.
That's really cool.
Kind of my not give up verse. So. Yeah,
and that's cool that you're writing that in kids' yearbooks too, because that's something that's so encouraging. That's really, really cool. And I want to ask you, I do some of like the fun questions with the guests every time I have them on, and they're always different as well. I like to keep them different, like, and hear different answers from different questions. What's one of it in the Bible that for the longest time like didn't really make sense to you, but now you're able to fully understand the meaning of that passage?
Well, I would say fasting. I don't really have like a verse, but I just know that's something I never really understood. Thankfully, several years ago, I went to a church that taught it really well. Because growing up, I didn't really learn a whole lot about it. I just thought it meant you didn't eat. I didn't really know. I just didn't know a lot about it. But what's cool learning about fasting is I actually was able to use it in the classroom. And what I mean by that is like in world history, the very beginning, because you learned a lot about religion. And it's basically the way that it was, you're giving something up, but you're replacing it with something else. So you're giving up lunch, whatever. So you're going to use that time to pray, or you're giving up. And it was cool because they presented it for kids to say, okay, you might give up TV shows for this time or whatever. So you're going to read your Bible or whatever. So it wasn't just about taking away food, but it was about replacing that with something else. And so that was something. Of course, there's the Daniel fast, and there's all different ways to do it. And that was just something in the Bible that was always kind of like a big mystery, is why is it even there? But it's so powerful. And And I love that like our churches are doing that more and teaching that, and what the true meaning of it is and why it's even done.
Yeah, and because through that, like it helps you to become so much more rooted in Christ and recognize like, yeah, like I'm taking something out of my life, but replacing that with Jesus, and it doesn't just have to be food, which is something I think is cool about it too, because, you know, I was even the same way. Like when I was younger, I'd hear fasting, it's just like, oh, you're just not eating food to starve yourself. Like,
Yeah.
what's like, why are we doing this? But whenever you replace it with, you know, like with like time with God, it's something that it's just cool to like understand the meaning of that. It's something that's really cool.
Yeah.
So now I want to ask you, what does it truly mean to you to live out your faith in your everyday life?
Well, it starts at home. It starts with my husband, because if I'm a jerk to him and I'm just sweet and wonderful to everybody else, that's not right, you know. If I yell at my kids, it starts in the home. My mom would tell me when I was raising my kids, and you're a stay-at-home mom, and you think, you know, what you do, it doesn't matter because you're taking care of babies and, you know, all that stuff all day long. But she said, your mission field is your dinner table. And she would say, you're ministering to your husband and taking care of him, and you're ministering to your kids and taking care of them, and then you're going to send them out into the kingdom and build the kingdom. And so I always felt like not that it's going to be perfect, but I've got to be better at that, so that when I go out and when they go out, we can be better when we go out and interact with other people. I think sometimes we focus so much on what we're doing outside of our home and not so much in our own home with our own, because those are the ones that are hardest to be nice to sometimes, because we're around them all the time. They drive us crazy. I mean, let's be honest. So it starts there, and then beyond that, I think the Lord just gives you opportunities to, because you get a lot more praise when you're nice to people outside of your house, but no one sees it at home.
Yeah.
So
That's really cool. And now as we start to get near the end of this week's episode, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier about that piece of advice that you'd heard. If you wouldn't mind repeating that piece of advice as the best piece of advice that you've ever heard or received.
It's something, again, like I said, I heard it about a little over 10 years ago, but your attitude and your effort are the only thing you can control. And that goes with anything. It can be in your spiritual life, it can be if you play a sport, it can be academics, it can be your job. It's just the attitude that you bring into a situation. You have control over that. And then the effort that you put in, you have control over that. Anything else that happens, you don't have control over. So, you know, it's so important that we approach things with the right attitude and with the right effort.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice for sure, and something that, you know, I bet you've been able to take with you throughout your days, and, you know, just in regards to being a parent and like teaching in school and everything. So that's something that's really, really cool. And now, as we, you know, again, as we're wrapping up here, what's the best piece of advice that you would want to give to the person watching or listening to this week's episode?
I think start where you are, wherever that is, whatever it looks like, wherever your walk is. If you've got the Bible memorized, if you were one of those people that said you were going to read the Bible in a year and you did it, that's awesome. If you're doing all that, that's awesome. Keep going, but don't get complacent. Don't let God's word become just something that sits on the counter, but like love it for what it is. And when I say that, I'm speaking to myself, but like if it's something that you've been familiar with your whole life, just ask the Lord to renew that excitement within you. And if you're somebody that doesn't read it at all, then pick it up and start reading. If you don't understand it, that's okay. I mean, and just allow the Lord to reveal things, allow the Holy Spirit to speak to you, and ask for people to come into your life to help you with that. And just start where you are, no matter where that is.
That's really cool. That's a great piece of advice to leave with the person watching or listening to this week's episode, and a great way to wrap things up here in this week's episode. So it's truly been an honor having you on the show this week, but that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode. As always, if you guys have any questions, comments, or suggestions, be sure to let me know down below. And if you know of anyone who'd be interested in hearing Miss Beasley's story, I'd encourage you to share it with them, because the goal of the GC show is to bring them all to heaven, point even just one more person toward Christ. And, you know, for those of you watched on YouTube, you know, usually there's an a video that pops up somewhere over here in the middle. I'd encourage you to go check that out because I believe that it is for you. But that is going to be a wrap. As always, I'll let Mrs. Beasley say the slogan at the end. But thank you guys for listening. I'll see you next week.
Be great and praise God.